In this video we will talk about the skirmishes between Pakistan and Afghanistan, controlled by the Taliban, with tensions rising more and more in tone. Are we witnessing the beginning of a new war in the world? And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news. The Taliban emerged in 1994, during the Afghan Civil War, formed by extremist students from Islamic seminaries located mainly in Pakistan, led by Mullah Omar. These extremists, many of them war refugees, sought to restore order in a country ravaged by conflict between warlords who had toppled the Soviet regime, using religious radicalization to attract members and fighters. Within a few years, the Taliban consolidated control over much of Afghanistan, establishing the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan in 1996, imposing a strict interpretation of Sharia law on Islamic law. His regime was characterized by a strong repression of human rights, especially women's, as well as a close relationship with extremist jihadist groups such as Al-Qaeda. The U.S. invasion in 2001 quickly toppled the Taliban from power, but the group was not destroyed, reorganizing as an insurgency and retreating into desert and mountainous regions, waging a highly costly guerrilla war against international forces and the Afghan government for 20 years, culminating in the tragic and shameful withdrawal of U.S. troops and the return to power. In 2021, from the beginning, Pakistan played a key role in strengthening the Taliban. During the 1980s, in the midst of the Cold War, Islamabad became a strategic ally of Washington, receiving vast resources to support the Mujahideen fighting against the Soviet invasion. This environment was the breeding ground for the emergence of the Taliban, who were openly supported by the Pakistani intelligence service between 2001 and 2021. While the group fought international forces, Pakistan served as a safe haven for its leaders and fighters, a relationship seen as mutually advantageous with the Taliban, ensuring a government sympathetic to Pakistani interests in Afghanistan. While Pakistan prevented its own country from being used as a base for hostile groups, with the return of the Taliban to power in Afghanistan in 2021, many expected relations between the two countries to be strengthened. However, despite a very promising start, the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan has suffered an unexpected twist. Pakistan, which as I said, for years sheltered Taliban leaders and facilitated their resurgence, found itself in a stalemate. Islamabad's expectations were that the Taliban should help neutralize TT, an even more extremist militant group with a clear agenda of destabilizing Pakistan. But that didn't happen, with the TTP finding a favorable environment in Afghanistan to train and organize, sharing ideologies and historical ties with the Afghan Taliban, but with operations entirely directed against the Pakistani government. For the Taliban, expelling or fighting TTP would be seen as a betrayal of ideological allies, a stance that has obviously infuriated Pakistan. In addition, the Afghan Taliban began to demonstrate increasing independence, rejecting direct Pakistani influence and seeking to consolidate their own power and space on the international stage. Support for the TTP and this growing autonomy of the Taliban has not only frustrated Pakistan but also created an environment of mutual distrust. Negotiations between the two governments became increasingly rare, with an inflammatory political discourse on both sides, thus leading to a rupture, showing that the interests of the two countries that were once allies had become irreconcilable in the events of December 2024 marked a new peak in the escalation of tensions. Pakistan, under internal pressure due to a wave of TTP attacks, decided to act forcefully with the Pakistani Air Force, carrying out strikes in Pakistan Province, Afghanistan, targeting TTP hideouts. These attacks resulted in nearly 50 casualties, with the Taliban claiming that the casualties included women and children. Although Pakistan claims that the targets were military, the impact on civilians has further increased tensions. The Taliban, for their part, reacted with fury, with the Taliban information minister declaring that any further attack would be treated as a serious violation of Afghanistan's sovereignty, leading to some Pakistani border posts being overrun and occupied by the Taliban between the Court and Pakistani provinces. The already volatile border between the two countries has become the scene of daily shootings with casualties on both sides, prompting the Afghan government to summon the Pakistani ambassador to formally protest. Islamabad continues to justify its actions as self-defense directed specifically against the TTP group, with the Taliban claiming for their part that this is nothing more than actions aimed at affecting the group's legitimacy over that border region. The impact of these attacks has been profound, with the international community expressing concern about the possibility of an escalation while local populations in the border regions suffer from displacement, and the intensification of the conflict is far from resolved, with the Taliban reaffirming that they will maintain their support for the TTP despite Pakistani pressure. The current conflict goes beyond military strikes, reflecting deep ideological and strategic divisions. For Pakistan, controlling TTP is a matter of national survival. But for the Taliban, admitting any Pakistani interference would weaken their internal authority and undermine their nationalist discourse. But there are also other important players in this geopolitical chessboard. China, for example, has a direct interest in the stability of the region, with Beijing seeking to ensure the security of the China-Pakistan economic corridor and prevent extremist groups from threatening its own region of Xinjiang. At the same time, China has been investing in relations with the Taliban government to exploit mineral resources in Afghanistan. Therefore, for the Chinese, a conflict between these two countries is seen as catastrophic for their heavy investments in the area. Iran, Afghanistan's and Pakistan's western neighbor, also plays a sensitive role. Although historically in conflict with the Taliban, Tehran has sought to keep channels open to protect its Shia communities in Afghanistan and ensure that the chaos in the region does not affect its own borders. With internal tensions increasingly intense, Iran is not interested in seeing a new war breaking out in neighboring countries. Finally, Russia is watching everything very closely. Moscow, which has a rather painful past in Afghanistan, is concerned that extremist groups could use Afghan territory as a base to threaten Central Asia, a region of great Russian influence. But at the same time, the Kremlin, which is seeking to revive diplomatic relations with Afghanistan, cannot put too much pressure on the Taliban. These dynamics indicate that the conflict is not limited to Pakistan and Afghanistan alone, with the potential to redraw alliances and rivalries in a region already marked by strong instability. What is happening on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border is a reflection of the historical dynamics that have shaped the entire region. A cycle of alliances and betrayals, of wars and negotiations that continue to impact not only the two countries, but also global security. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news.